Hello everybody and welcome back to our Simple Space Shooter tutorial series. Today we're going to be creating a class that will create these bad guys and fire them off at the player at set intervals. We'll essentially be creating our level. But first, we need to make a slight amendment to the bad guy AI that we made last time around. So let's open up our baddie script. I just want to show you some quick changes we made. So one of the things about our move function here is what it's actually doing is we're finding a vector that then in our spaceship class we're taking and applying to our position. And what we're doing in our baddie is we're really finding where on a sine wave our position is. So it really doesn't make sense to add it to our previous position. That's why we're getting these weird sort of exaggerated curves. So we've made a couple changes here, or I've made a couple changes here. The change here is after we have our movement vector, we're subtracting from that our transform.position on the y. And after we have our move vector on the x, we're also subtracting our transform.position on the x. So this is effectively nullifying our previous position so that when this movement vector gets added to our transform.position, the transform.positions are canceling each other out, essentially. So we're not compounding our movement, we're just moving along this sine wave. Now, part of that means if we're moving on a sine wave, that means we're anywhere from 1 on the y to -1 on the y, and our x is going to start from 0 and continue to the left as the time goes on. We want to start from anywhere on the screen. I mean, most likely we're going to be starting from the right side of the screen and then anywhere from the top or the bottom of the screen. So I had to add these serialized fields for the starting x and the starting y. So when we spawn these bad guys, we're going to, really these values up here for position won't matter because we're going to explicitly define where it's going to start on the x and where it's going to start on the y. So right now you see them as 0, 0, and then 50 on the z. If I hit play, we should snap to 64 and 28, and here now it's traveling along that sine wave. And you can see that's actually a sine wave. That's not compounding the position. Okay, so that covers the changes we made to what we did last time. Now let's start thinking about creating a class that is going to be spawning these bad guys, probably in packs and at specific intervals. So let's go into our project, go into our scripts folder, right click, create, C# script, and we're going to call this baddie spawner. Go ahead and open that up, and I'll see you in the code editor. Okay, first thing we want to do is define a class that's going to hold all the values that we need for each attack wave. So let's do that. Let's do public class attack wave. And in this class, we want to know stuff like public int wave size. That's actually a little ambiguous. Let's say number of baddies. So that's the number of baddies that are going to be in the wave. Rate of spawn. So this is how fast the baddies are going to be spawned during the wave. And then we need to know some of the baddie info. So stuff like the wave sizes, the starting X, and the starting Y. So we'll just bring those on over. Get rid of the serialized field and change them to public. And that's everything we need to know to spawn, let's say, 6 baddies at a rate of 1 per quarter of a second, and exactly what their wave is going to look like as they travel across the screen. So let's go to the baddie spawner class here, which I've gutted, and we're going to have a serialized field, and we're going to have a private list of attack waves, and that's where we'll define all the attack waves that are happening. We're going to sync that up with a private list float m wave times. And on top of that, we're going to set new list float. And we're going to do the same thing with attack waves here. New list attack wave. And now we also want a private float m timer. We'll set that to 0. So in our update function, we'll start by incrementing the timer. like so. And now, oh, sorry, we want to keep track of one more thing. Private int m current wave. And that's going to equal to 0 as well. So we're going to say if m timer is greater than m wave times m current wave. Whoop. Then we want to do a couple things in here. For one thing, we want to increment the wave. So we're going to be on the next wave. And then we're going to start a coroutine. Woo! Messing this up. So we're going to do, we're going to pass in the current attack wave. Which means actually this increment needs to happen down here. Too many parentheses. And so coroutines we'll talk about in a second. We need to create this function here. And it's going to be an I enumerator. So coroutines, let's talk about these for a second. We have this I enumerator they have to return. And we can do that by yield return null. So what coroutines do here is it's going to kick off this function, the spawn wave function. And then within the spawn wave function, it's going to have its own loop and its own timer that are going on. And so we can tell it to do things at a specific time while this update function is going to continue chugging along. And this won't get in the way of what's happening there. So this function, even though it's going to be waiting and replaying a couple times, it's not going to hold this up. We're still going to increment and then come back around in the loop. So in our case, we want to spawn a wave of bad guys at a certain time interval, so which we have up here in our attack wave class that we're sending in. Actually, let's put a little underscore there. Okay, so we're going to yield return new wait for seconds. And we're going to give that the attack wave dot rate of spawn. And that's going to happen at the bottom of this function. So it's going to spawn one, come here, wait for this many seconds, come back around and do it again. But first we need a little loop here. So I'm going to say for our I equals 0, I less than attack wave dot number of baddies, I plus plus. So just a basic silly C loop kind of thing that should do all the time. So now we want to go about spawning our bad guys and giving them the right parameters. So I'm going to say var baddie equals game object dot instantiate, and you know what, we need a bad guy prefab in our serialized fields here. Private baddie prefab m baddie prefab. Okay, so instantiate m baddie prefab. Don't care about the parent or anything like that. Baddie dot component baddie, and then we need to, you know what I should do actually. Sorry, because this is just a game object, and we want the baddie component from the game object, and now we need a way to pass in these variables on spawn. So we're going to come to our baddie class here and add a spawn function. And in our spawn function, we're going to just pass in some starting values. So we're going to take a wave size, starting x, starting Y, and set our values to whatever it is we pass in. So now in our baddie spawner, we can call baddy.spawn and pass in the values from our attack wave. So we have wave size starting X and starting Y. Let me make sure I did that in the right order, and I did. Okay, so now what's happening right now, delete that, we don't need that, is we're creating a new game object, and we'll do this in an object pool, but for now we're going to start with this. Creating the game object, we're getting the baddie component out of the game object. We're calling the spawn function to set all of its variables, and then we're coming back around for another set of the loop after we wait for this rate of spawn. So let's test this out and see if it works indeed. So back into Unity, we're going to come to our baddie here, go to our prefabs folder in the assets, and we're going to drag our baddie parent into there. We're also going to drag our player into there just so. So now we have the baddie as a prefab, which just means we have all these values saved, and we can drag as many of these as we want into the scene, and they're all going to have these start values. So we're going to go ahead and delete all the baddies from our scene. We're going to go to game object, create empty, throw it at 0, 0, 0, and we'll call this game object the baddie spawner. We're going to add component, baddie spawner, and we'll drag our baddie prefab in, and then we'll create a wave at 3 seconds. So we can't actually serialize this attack waves field because it's not a plain old C object, it's a complex object, and Unity doesn't know how to do that for us. So we're going to have to create this list programmatically. So here in program private void start is where we're going to set up our attack waves. So let's just create one to start with. Our attack wave equals new attack wave. We'll set the number. We'll say it spawns 3. The rate of spawn, it's going to spawn 1 per every, let's say, half second. Oops, sorry, that should just be an equal. The starting Y can start at 0, and the X can start at, so there's our attack wave. Let's add it to our list. Attack waves.add attack wave. And so now we have a wave in our list. We have a corresponding time for the wave, so it's at 3 seconds. We should start spawning bad guys given the parameters that we put in. I missed a parameter of wave size, I believe. Yes, let's put that into attack wave.m. Wave size is equal to, I don't know, 10. There's also a speed. I think I'm missing that too. Or am I not? No, that's the movement speed. Okay, that's actually tied to the although we should probably set that. Whatever. We'll let's just see if this works. Okay. Press play, see what happens. 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000. They're colliding with each other. Let's change that. So collisions happen in spaceship. We're going to want to add a little enumerator here. So we'll do public enum spaceship type. and it's either a player or it's an enemy. And we'll add a serialized field, private, spaceship type, spaceship type. And so for these collisions, which happens here on collision enter, we just want to make sure that game object, get component, spaceship, dot, and we're going to need a little accessor here, public spaceship type. Sorry, I'm all over the place. Get spaceship type, return our spaceship type. Did I call it spaceship type? Sorry, this should have been spaceship type. Get spaceship type is not equal to whatever our spaceship type is. So bad guys can only collide with good guys, or the player, and good guys can only collide with bad guys. So that should stop the bad guys from smacking into each other like we just saw. Okay. 1, 1000, 2, 1000, 3, 1000. And see, we have our 3 bad guys spawned in just like we wanted. Okay. We're also colliding with each other, which is kind of funny. We can do something about that too. So one thing we want to do here is, one thing I overlooked is our spaceship here controls the speed. So we need to expose a way to set the movement speed. Public void set movement speed. Move speed equals to, let's take in a float. Okay. And then in our spawn, we're going to add float speed at the end of this. We're going to say set movement speed. So back in our baddie spawner, under attack wave, we're also going to have a field for movement speed. So we'll set that here too. And then when we spawn, we want to make sure we pass that in. Okay, so now we set every aspect of these. So the next thing we want to do is, you can see when we play this and they start spawning in, you can see that they have a tendency, although in this case they spawned fast enough that they didn't do it, but they can potentially hit each other and knock each other out of whack. It doesn't look like that's happened this time, but it is possible. Oh, another thing we had to do. Sorry. So we added that enumeration and we didn't apply it. So come over here to our prefabs folder, click on baddie prefab, under spaceship type, make sure he's an enemy. And same for the player. It should already default to player, but we just want to make sure that that is checked. Okay, so now it should be able to collide with our player. Okay. Getting a little error here. Let's see what that points to. So we also want to check, before we check the wave times, we need to make sure that wave times dot count is greater than the current wave. So that should deal with that error. Let's check that that's so. Yep, so we're not seeing that error anymore. And the next thing we want to do is make sure that the bad guys, so they already can't hurt each other when they collide, but they can still technically collide, just as like rigid bodies. They're things floating out there and they can hit each other. and that can potentially divert their course, and we don't want that to happen. So we're going to make some changes to what they can collide with. In order to do that, we're going to have to set up something called layers. So if we click on our baddy, our baddy prefab here, you see where it says layer default. Let's come out to add layer. And we're going to add a layer here. And we'll call it the enemy layer. Okay. And then back to our prefab, we're going to put this enemy on the enemy layer. We can say yes, change children. It really doesn't matter for what we're doing. And now we want to make sure that enemies collide with everything else, all the other layers, but not the enemy layer. Okay, now we're going to come out to the project settings, and we're looking for physics, I believe. And down here, so this kind of shows what can collide with what. So if I uncheck this bottom one, that's saying that the enemy, they can collide with all these things, but not other enemies. And so that should be all we need to make sure that no matter what speed or what's going on with the enemies that get spawned, they won't hit each other and divert each other off course and that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and configure the rest of our waves of bad guys. And since we're programmatically assigning the bad guy waves, let's also programmatically assign the times on the waves. It'll make it easier to kind of sync everything up. So we've added our first attack wave there. Let's add a wave time add, and at 3 seconds. So we have one wave that's going to come at 3 seconds. Let's add another wave that comes at 6 seconds, and we'll change up some of the values here. We'll start a little higher. A little bigger wave size. Maybe a bit faster. I think the starting X is probably always going to be this 70 number, but I don't know. We'll see. There may be instances where we don't want that. Let's add another wave. And this one will come at the 9-second mark. 5 bad guys coming in at quick wide wave, and very fast. A second later, another set of bad guys will come. So this is at 10 seconds. And likely we'll have to tweak all these, but just for now, we're going to play around with it. Spawn, go back up to 5. We'll keep the 5 bad guys. Even wider wave, and we'll keep about that time. So let's see what this looks like when we play. Those guys are probably a little too fast. So 30 is probably too fast movement speed, but you can kind of get an idea. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to show the rest of this, but I'm going to create a bunch of attack waves, just like I've been doing here, and you can do that too until you have enough for, let's say, maybe an entire minute or two of gameplay. Okay, so now I have a number of waves that go from 3 seconds, they start spawning, all the way to 120 seconds. And at that point, we'll do the boss, but that's for another show. For now, one thing we're going to change is here when we instantiate, we want to make sure they instantiate where they're actually going to be. Otherwise, they're going to instantiate in the middle of the scene. So if we look around here, we have we can feed it a position. So we're going to say new vector 3. We're going going to say attack wave dot m starting x, attack wave dot m starting y, and then our z value, which is, I believe, 50. And we'll create a little, before we're done there. Or is that all we need? No, we have to give it a rotation, but we'll just keep the rotation where it's at. Oh, sorry, we need a quaternion. So let's take this 50 and create a constant, just so we can see it better. So private const float C Z position. Go ahead and copy that over the 50. All right, and that should take care of spawning. So now what we have here is, we're instantiating these bad guys on the fly, and that should be everything we're going to do this time around for spawning bad guys. In our next edition of this series, what we'll do is create our boss bad guy for the game, and he's going to be able to shoot bullets and also soak up a lot of player fire. And then we'll just have one remaining episode for tying up loose ends like game over states and that sort of thing. And yeah, so it'll be a good time. Please join us. Please leave a like if you feel so inclined. If not, that's cool too. Let me know if you're following along. Also, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to help out. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye.